A continent without borders, a mystery that lies beyond the Podomaic Ocean in Tambriel's shadow. Much of what is known about Akavir is incomplete or unknown. No map exists of it. But Akavir has visited us twice. Tambriel was divided then, a patchwork of kings, but one man would rise to bind the realm beneath his banner. He would come to be known as Reman Cyrodiil, sometimes enumerated as Reman I, called the worldly god, Old Reman, and established the Reman dynasty, the first of the largest empires after Saint Alacia.
The Akaviri began their conquest on the northern coasts of Morrowind and Skyrim and to the Jural Mountains, defeating all in their path. However, by landing in Morrowind, the invaders had arisen the anger of the god Vivec, a member of the tribunal that ruled the province. Meanwhile, Reman had brought the armies of Colovia and the Nibene Valley together to defeat the invasion. Realizing that they had a common enemy, Vivec and Reman reached an agreement to join forces to defeat the invaders completely. Many of the old forts and castles in Skyrim are remnants of the network of fortifications Reman had built to defend against Akavir. One of those forts was the Pale Pass. The road is lonely, snowy, and treacherous. An Akaviri courier walks for several days from Grey Ridge. He has an important message in his hands to deliver to the occupied Akaviri fort of Pale Pass. Days of walking, each step slower than the last, until he stumbles upon another courier. His leg was hurt badly. He had been beset by a pack of mountain wolves. He shares what little medicine he has to the courier, binding the wound. The courier's name is Salaj. He is carrying a message too. Pale Pass is starving. Supplies are dwindling. Reinforcements must come. Yet the bitter truth? None will. Vivec himself has struck the Akaviri rear, severing the flow of grain and steel. The two decide to turn back together. Their path is grim. Wolves stalk them in the tree line. Worse still, hulking shapes move in the blizzard. Trolls, perhaps, or something fouler. One of the creatures swings once and Salaj's head is cleaved clean into the snow. The other messenger flees, but his escape is brief. With his final strength, entrails spilling and breath fading, he scrawls one last note with frozen fingers. "Tell my wife Vada that Zaviri will always love her."
The Sayaschi forces of Akavir were decisively defeated at Pale Pass by the army of Reman I. Instead of complete annihilation, he convinced them to help him build his own empire, by which he later conquered all of Tamriel except for Morrowind, and also recognized Reman as the first of the Dragonborn dynasty. In 2E572, Tamriel once again faced the Serpent of the East. Ad-Asum Dir Kamal led the Kamal in a second invasion, but Joran the Scald King, a Nord who would later rule Skyrim, rallied allies from Morrowind and even the Argonians of Blackmarsh. Together they formed what became the Ebonheart Pact, which drove back the second Akavir invasion, an abrupt end. Their purpose for invasion remains a mystery. One account mentioned that Dir Kamal was searching for an item, or a person called the Ordained Receptacle. Whether they ever found it was unknown, but the invasion was ultimately repelled. In fact, when asked directly in an ESO Reddit AMA, lead writer Wynne McLaughlin only teased, "not telling, yet." By then, the Reman dynasty was long dead. The Dragonborn Septims ruled in their place. And it was under Uriel V, a restless man, who decided that the empire would carry its banners east, into the unknown, the edge of the world. On 23rd Rain's Hand, 288, the expeditionary force left Black Harbor with fair weather and landed in Akavir after 6 weeks at sea. They arrived at what seemed to be a small seaport at the mouth of a large river, riddled with sandbars, reefs, and shallow waters, making it harder to establish a good port. But then something was off. The port was empty, abandoned, silent. No guards, no signs of life. The army pressed upriver to the next city. It suffered the same symptoms. Why was it empty? Where had everyone gone? What had driven them away? These doubts, however, did not concern Uriel, assuming the Saisi had already surrendered. The original plan had been to bring the two reinforcing legions across as soon as the initial landing had secured a port, to instead begin using the first fleet following Uriel to transport colonists. The Emperor and the Council agreed that, due to the complete abandonment of the conquered area by its native population, colonists were needed to work the field so that the expeditionary force would not have to rely entirely on the fleet for supplies. Uriel was confident that with the sword of his 4 legions, he could bring the Saisi to simply bend the knee and strike a deal. The winter storm season of 288-289 was unusually prolonged and exceptionally severe, and delayed a third fleet to Akavir as planned with reinforcements and supplies. On 5 Suns' dawn, Sayas-Chi envoys came to Ionith with peace. However, that night they slit the guards' throats and opened the gates. The Emperor's life was nearly taken, saved only by the 10th's vigilance. By dawn, every infiltrator lay dead. Safe to say, negotiations were over. The arrival of spring only brought worse troubles. Instead of the expected spring rains, a hot, dry wind began to blow from the east, continuing with varying strength through the entire summer. The crops failed. It is unknown if this was due to a previously unknown weather pattern unique to Akavir, but the absurd thought that the Sayas-Chi were responsible loomed. Due to prolonged bad weather, the Third Fleet was late in setting out from Black Harbor. It finally left port in early Second Seed, but was again severely mauled by storms and limped into Septimia 8 weeks later, much reduced. Several watch forts on the road between Septimia and Ionith were captured during blizzards, and the rest had to be abandoned as untenable. As a result, communication between the two cities had to be conducted entirely by magical means, a strain on the Legion's battle mages. The Council urged the Emperor to abandon the invasion and to return to Tamriel with the expeditionary force, but he again refused, noting that the Third Fleet, which arrived, was no longer large enough to transport all 4 legions back at once, and would result in the stranding of 1 or 2 legions to be slaughtered. The Commission also notes that the loss of 1 or 2 legions would have been preferable to the loss of the entire expeditionary force. The Council notes that this was the last point at which complete disaster might have been averted.
Storms forming across the eastern straits. Estimated delay for Third Fleet, 3 weeks minimum. Movement north.
Saisi massing beyond mountain range. Emperor orders advance before they consolidate.
Copy. Awaiting Imperial directive.
Requesting fleet support. Visibility 0. They're already here.
From this point on, much less is known about what transpired in Akavir. What is known is that the Emperor marched out of Ionith in mid-sun's height, leaving only small garrisons to hold the cities. He had learned that the Saeski were massing their forces on the other side of a mountain range to the north, and he intended to smash their army before it could gather full strength. All we know is this: the fleet that had been sent back to Tamriel for supplies returned only to find Septimia under ferocious assault by a vast Saeski host. The Imperial battle mages held the line just long enough for survivors to embark and the fleet to escape. They limped back to Black Harbor without Uriel, without the legions, without an emperor. Ionith was like D-Day, but nobody made it past Normandy. The disaster at Ionith would turn out to become the most mysterious, most unanswered campaign in all of Imperial history. It left more questions than answers, and left hundreds of dead in its shroud. One day, perhaps, a united empire will return, and vengeance will fall for Ionith, for the fallen legions, and for the Emperor who never came home.